Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. It's been a while, but I'm very keen to get back to the series. In our last video in part 4, we decided to split everything up into its own place. So for example, now we have the player's controller, we have our DB over here, our index with all our roots, and our server right over here, which is going to create our player table if it doesn't exist. And as a companion to that, in GameMaker, we can now click continue. We can select from one of our many saves, and that is it. In today's video, I want us to expand on that player object. Let's add some coordinates so that we can come into the screen, choose a player, click continue, go to some sort of game room and have that player instance spawn at those coordinates. Now, before we begin, if you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my Patreon. Links are in the description. You can also subscribe and hit that bell notification to make sure you get a notification when I upload videos just like this. There's something I actually want to improve. I'm going to close this. Let's go back to player's controller over here. Now, before, to get the ID of the newly inserted row, I had to do all of this, which I really don't like. So I did some reading, and I figured out that this lambda function kind of hides that ability to return that row quite easily. Therefore, we have to do this. So if we want to kind of simplify this a bit, all we've got to do is change this back to a function, get rid of this. All right, and now I can get rid of this bit of code over here. I don't need to do the select ID. I can simply say res.end this.last ID.toString, just like that. So the scope of this is to this function over here. So that enables us to actually get the last ID of the last inserted row. No mess, no fuss, right? That's a lot nicer. Okay, so we want to include an X and Y coordinate. Let's go to our server. Over here, we see this is where our table is created. I'm going to add some new columns over here. Let's do room ID while we're at it also. Integer, not null. We're going to say X, integer, not null, Y, integer, not null. We're just going to be storing them as integers, the X and Y. We could get more complex later on, floats, doubles, however we feel we need the accuracy to be, but for right now, whole numbers is perfectly fine. Back to player's controller. Here we had our insert, where we inserted our values, name, sprite. Let's include room ID, X, Y, and we need a couple more question marks. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very good. And then our params over here. We want to say request.body.room ID, and we say request.body.x, request.body.y, and these will be automatically mapped to those. All right, then let's make sure that when we get our object, we get it with these values, right? Because we want to get the complete player object whenever we make a request, and down here too. Very, very nice. Let's just do this alignment. Awesome. Save that. And actually, now that we've fixed the way to get the last ID over here, we can forget about making the player name unique, because we don't really need it to then get the last ID, because we've solved that problem. We can get it just using the last ID, which is automatically determined based on this DB run. Okay, cool. So let's restart our server. I want to go to Postman. And we actually need to delete this database because we've changed the structure of the player table. So we actually have to stop it. Let's go to our DB, game DB over here. Delete. Yes. And when we fire this up again, it'll create a new DB for us. There we go. This DB now will have all the right columns in the player table. Let's go to Postman over here. We need to update our post. So we've got post. We're going to send through an X. We're going to send through a Y over here. Let's say X is 10. Let's do Y 50. So player 2, adventurer 2, room ID 1, X, Y. All right, save that. Let's send that through. See what happens. Check this out. So it's returned ID 1. If I change this, let's do 1. Let's do 1. Let's do 50-50. This should say 2. Very good. If I go get all, we should get our 2 newly created objects. Pretty neat, huh? 50-50, 10-50. So that's everything we would needed to really change here in our server side. Let's actually head over to GameMaker Studio now and update everything on that side to gather those values, get us to the game world, and spawn or create an instance of that player in the right position in the room. Okay, so this is where we left off. Let's go to object saves. This is where we create an instance of each selector, so these are each of those saves. Let's add some new properties here. Let's say x equals dsmap find value of the map. Then y, it's the same thing, we just put y. Let's do room ID equals same thing, room ID. Okay, so that'll save those properties to the selector. So when we interact with the selector, we can then interrogate the selector and say, well, what do we need to do? Where do we need to put you when we create you in the room? Which room we're going to? Things like that. Here I want to say if selected we're gonna store some of these in globals. I can do the same. Actually, I can grab all of these. Because when we load the page for the first time, we actually want the user to be able to go to the game room immediately. Very good. Now let's go to the selector itself over here. In the left pressed, let's add a similar kind of story. So actually let me go up here. So when we click one of the selectors, it's going to be basically updating all the globals. But this is just setting it to those values of itself that we kind of set up over here. Underscore name, sprite index. Oh, actually that's just sprite index, isn't it? Underscore x, underscore y, like that. Very good. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and create an object called object player. To the create event, we are going to say x equals global x, y equals global y, and sprite index equals global sprite index. All right, and let's add a step event with some basic movement. Then in our world, later on we'll use that room ID of the player to put the player in different rooms, but for now let's just put it in here. Let's grab this player, we can just put it anywhere, it doesn't matter. This will update because of those global variables that we're setting depending on what is selected. I want to create another continue button. Can I duplicate this guy? I shouldn't call it continue 2 for now. Later we'll give that a better name. And what's it gonna do here? Event inherited, that's all I need. Don't need this async event. I just want this to go to room world. And let's put that in the selection room where the saves are. We'll put that over here on the right. So we come to the screen, we make our selection, we click continue, it'll take us to the game world, and we will load into that world depending on what was selected. So if a character was selected that was in 50-50 XY, it would then spawn our character in 50-50 XY when we click continue. Quite neat, huh? Let's save everything and let's try it out. Let's see what happens. Our server is running. We have those 2 test users. There they are. Because we have test users, it says continue. Let's click continue. Here we go. It isn't sorting or anything by alphabetical order, but that doesn't really matter for now. Let's try player 2, click continue, it should take us to the game world, and we should see this guy spawning in a spot. Okay, but off the screen, sure, not a problem. Let's try the other player. Let's actually just add an event here. Key press, others, escape, room, go to room. Let's go back to the main menu. If we press escape, and let's actually go to postman. Let's make player 3, adventurer 3. Let's make this like 200 by 200, so it's a bit more visible that it's actually working. Post, send that through. Should get ID 3, very good. Back to GameMaker, let's fire this up. Okay, here we go. We should see player 3. Let's click continue. Oh wow, there you go. See, spawns it in this position, which is 200, 200. Let's push escape. Let's try player 1. He's at the top left. Player 2, a bit off the screen. So you can see, depending on what's actually saved about those players, when we load into the game world, it's actually going to put them in a space. Very, very neat, huh? So that's everything I actually want to do in this video. The next video, I want to save the position of where this block lands up. So I'm just using WSAD to move around. But eventually I want to get to this kind of position, push escape, have that save to the database again, so that when we come back, we can resume from that position. But you'll notice here we don't actually have a put event just yet. The put event is used to change something about an object or an instance that already exists on the server, in this case, the player. And also maybe while we're there, we can use this room ID to go to Game World 1 or Game World 2, however we want to do that. So I hope you found this tutorial educational and helpful. I will be bringing back more videos regularly. I know we took a little bit of a break, but the series is actually developing quite nicely. If you like what I'm doing here and want to support this channel, please check out my Patreon. Make sure you are subscribed and click that bell notification icon. So until next time, happy coding, and I'll see you then.